You are listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast with Rob Reed and Josh Galicki, bringing together the love of nature and photography. Episode 14, Why We Shoot with the Camera Brands We Do. Hey Josh, how's life across the pond?
Hey Rob, doing pretty good. Enjoying the last throes of summer and getting excited for migration. I'm starting to see things on the move. So things are going well.
Yeah, well, we're just chatting actually before we started recording this, and I was just saying it's 30 degrees over here. It doesn't feel much like autumn at the moment. It's more like high summer.
Yeah, I think today here I'm in Maryland on the Eastern Shore. It's about, I think it's 92, 93.
Yeah,
and it feels it.
Pretty hot. Yeah, it's pretty hot. It's not far off that here, and we've got so much humidity. It's really quite sticky. I've got the fan on going it's 11 o'clock at night when we're recording this, and I've got the fan going and the windows open and bugs flying in and that sort of thing. So it's the summer certainly isn't over quite yet, but I'm looking forward to the autumn actually. All the migrants coming in and the leaves starting to turn and the fungi appearing in the woodland and all this sort of stuff. So I'm looking forward to getting out and shooting some fungi. Actually, I want to have some fun with those this year.
That does sound great.
Yeah. So the first thing, I really ought to apologize to everybody for screwing up the recording last time around and uploading the wrong audio file to episode 13 originally. So I know that caused a bit of confusion with everybody. So apologies for my senior moment.
It was very difficult to repeat and do two interviews with Henley Spears.
But we did it verbatim as well. It was amazing.
We're that good.
Who'd have thought it, huh? Who'd have thought it? And they say these things aren't scripted. Which they're not. They're entirely off the cuff. I should really make a few more notes when we do these things, but I kind of like the organic nature of them, to be honest with you.
True.
We all start off with a bit of an idea, and I might write a few bullet points down, but apart from that, we generally just go with the flow, which is what we're going to do today, actually, because we thought we'd talk about why we shoot with the camera systems that we do and the things that we like about them, because I'm a Nikon shooter. I know, Josh, you shoot Canon. And it's not going to be, this is not intended to be a Nikon versus Canon, face off or anything like that. I just, to be honest, I think everybody has enough of that sort of stuff. But I just think cameras are a very personal thing. And I just thought we could talk about, why we like the cameras that we shoot with and why they're sort of so personal to us. So Josh, I've actually have shot with Canon. I started with Canon and then made the switch a few years ago. I know you've not shot Nikon, but what sort of led you down the Canon path originally?
I think like most people, it was completely by accident. One of the first DSLRs I bought back in the day, I guess it was the first, now that I'm thinking about it, was an older Rebel, and it was a Rebel Canon Rebel. And because I started shooting that, you just get used to the functionality, you get used to the menus, you start to buy a lens or two, and then you decide to upgrade, and you're normally kind of in that system. So it was accidental, actually. I just decided to buy a Rebel years ago. I can't remember if this was the Andre Agassi days. If you recall, he was the Rebel sponsor. They used to run ads and the like, and that's where I started. And I never looked back from there. Have I decided or have I thought about switching systems and the like? Sure, I think a lot of people have, and they have. People have gone back and forth. Some have even returned to an old brand. A friend of mine was Nikon. I say Nikon, but a friend that's I guess a North American thing. A friend of mine who shot Nikon for years switched to Sony and actually just went back to Nikon. So, it happens all the time. Me, it just so happens I've just stayed within Canon because it's just something I know.
Yeah, because I started life with Canon as well. I had the first DSLR I bought was the 300D. Which is like, I think it was about £400 or £500 or, probably about 500 US at the time. I guess this must have been about maybe 2004, 2005, perhaps. And I think it was about 6 megapixels or something like that. It was one of their sort of entry level cameras. And yeah, that's where I started. And then very quickly, not long after I bought that, they came out with a 5D, the original Mark One, the 12 megapixel 5D, which was like a game changer of a camera at the
It was a
time.
famous camera, yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was the camera to have. So I bought one of those. I ended up with two of those, and I shot with those up until, oh crikey, it must have been about 2012, 2013 even, because I didn't, although they obviously had the Mark II and probably the Mark III out by then.
Yeah.
I didn't feel the need to spend the money on those camera bodies going forward. And in the end, I ended up switching to Nikon. I say Nikon, you say Nikon. Hey, and I ended up switching for no other reason other than the people that I was working with at the time. The two of them both shot with Nikon, so it kind of made sense if I was going to upgrade my gear, which I needed to at that point, to say, well, actually, let's switch to Nikon because then we can sort of gear share to a degree. So that's what I did, and I ended up buying a secondhand D800 with I think I did go and buy a new 70 to 200 f 2.8, but I bought a secondhand 24 to 70, which I've still got those lenses, and sort of started from there really. And that D800 I had for 8 or 9 years until I bought the 850 about 18 months ago, something like that. And of course now I've splashed out and got the Z9 because of course I had to. And I've kind of been, so for the last 10 years, it's really just been, or well, is it 10 years? Probably getting on for. It's just been Nikon, and I've just grown to love the brand, and I just like the way the camera looks and feels, and I just like everything ergonomically. It fits my hand really well. I think that's got to be part of it, hasn't it? You've just got to. It's rather like a car. It's such a personal thing. You can't sometimes describe why you like something, but you just do, and you feel comfortable with it. And I think that's what you get to in the end, doesn't it? You feel comfortable with something. It's not necessarily
Yeah, ergonomics are important. It's interesting you mentioned that too. And a lot of people will mention to me that, like, I love how this feels in the hand. And it's something that a lot of people, they overlook, if you will. And they're like, oh, well, what about the megapixel, the frame count? Ergonomics are important to a lot of people. The more and more people I speak to, other photographers, especially in the wildlife community, because you're out there with your gear for extended amounts of time, or you're sitting in a prone position, you're in a blind or whatever, ergonomics are important. And a lot of people underestimate just how important ergonomics are to a lot of folks. For me, they're important. I have to say, and again, I'm comparing brands. I don't want to do it too much in the conversation, but for instance, and this is just me, I don't have, this is going to go down a weird road. I don't have huge hands. I don't have small hands either. I'm like, sound like somebody else talking recently, but at the end of the day, if Sony, for instance, some of the recent mirrorless cameras that they released, and if you don't have the battery grip on them, they're actually quite small, and they kind of market to that it's small and compact. But for me, I like something a little bigger, actually, just because it's comfortable, and sometimes bulkier is actually better. Smaller and sleek isn't always the solution when it comes to camera equipment. And I know ergonomics is a whole rabbit hole in and of itself, but it's something that's, I think, often overlooked when people think about camera brands.
Yeah, and I think actually, you saying those things, it's sort of when I'm out photographing birds, and you've got the reasonably long lens the majority of the time, and I just find that when I've balanced that sort of the 2 to 500, which is the lens I use most of the time because I just find it so versatile, with that sort of zoom range, and it's fairly lightweight, but the two sort of go together quite well. They're quite nicely balanced, with the Z9 having that built-in grip. When you do a vertical, you've got all the you've got all the dials and buttons in the right places and all that sort of thing. And I'm with you. Having sort of shot with other systems and tried them out, the sort of the Micro Four Thirds type systems with the smaller bodies and everything, they're great for saving weight and everything, but they to me they don't feel quite the same in the hand. And I think that if money were no object for me, I think I would shoot two systems. I would have probably a Micro Four Thirds system like OM, with, just for saving weight. Because when I go for, let's say I go for a long hike somewhere and I'm doing more landscapes or abstract nature type stuff, I don't need the full frame camera. It's just, it's a non-issue for me, that
Yeah.
when I'm doing that sort of stuff. All I'm interested in is saving the weight. But when I'm out doing birds, I kind of like having something a bit more chunky in my hand, because I mean, I'm like you, I don't have huge hands. Then they're not tiny, but they're not huge. But the Nikon just sits in them really nicely, and all the buttons are at the fingertips as they should be.
Yeah.
And there's just something about it that I really like. And apart from anything else, it's built like an absolute tank.
Yeah.
All the cameras I've had, the 800E, the 850, and now the Z9. I mean, they're all built. The quality of them is I think second to none. I can't compare them to the Canon because I've not shot with a Canon, and as you say, this isn't a comparison thing.
It's probably similar, I would say. There's not a high degree of I think the biggest degree of variability that you have right now as a consumer, exactly to what you just said, like with the Micro Four Thirds OMD, I wouldn't mind having a system like that too, because so many times I have to get to locations that include a lot of hiking. You're walking miles, you're trekking, you're climbing boulders, whatever. I was actually just not that long ago at a hawk watching site, so it takes a long time to get up there. I'd love to have something light, and really, there is a trade-off there. You have something that's light, that's durable, that you can easily throw in your pack. It's not going to take up a lot of space, and you can bring it with you on a hike. But at the same time, there is some sacrifice there when it comes to depth of field, ISO performance. But you trade that away for something that's light and compact, and it's going to get you the reach, and you're going to be able to use it when you need it, and your back isn't going to be broken. So there's always, I think there's more of a trade-off between the Micro Four Thirds system and the traditional systems, if you will, versus just what we're talking about, Canon and Nikon.
I think actually that is exactly what those 2 points you made about depth of field and ISO performance are the very reason that I stuck with full frame and didn't go down the route of Micro Four Thirds and a lighter body, just for those reasons. Because as for my photography, and that sort of that nice shallow depth of field that I like, and it just I don't know, it just didn't sit perfectly with me. But for the sort of landscape, the more abstract style images that I would take, certainly if I were out walking. I mean, I did a 15-mile walk a couple of weeks ago along a section of disused canal in Powys in Wales. And I took Sky out for it. She came along with me, and we just had a nice walk for a whole day. But I had to take the camera. But I took the Z9. I think I had this 24-70, the macro lens, and maybe did I restrict it? I think I restricted it just the two lenses because of the weight. But when you factor in all the water and the food you've got to take with you as well, and I had to take a tripod, of course.
It adds up.
There was a light, and actually, at the end of the day, your back's just shot.
You passed boot camp. You're like ready for basic training.
Yeah, exactly. And you think, if only I had a Micro Four Thirds system, it would be perfect for that sort of thing. But generally speaking, as an artistic photographer, the way I like to take images of birds in particular, I think that full frame camera, with that really lovely sort of shallow depth of field that you can get. And, let's come on to talk about ISO performance, actually, because I think that's one of the areas. And as I said, this isn't a, Nikon versus Canon, who wins type of conversation. But I do think that, and I've always thought this, having shot the two systems, although obviously the Canon system I shot was a very early iteration of where they are now. I really do think that the ISO performance of the Nikon is better. and I think most people would agree with that. Particularly, I mean, I forget what is it the R3 you've got?
Yeah, I have the R3 and the R5. Canon hasn't released much in the way of, well, at least on the pro grade and kind of the professional body. They haven't done much really since, it's been a little while now. They've been doing a lot for some of the consumer releases, like what the R10 and some of the other things, but on the higher end mirrorless cameras, they really haven't done much in a while. The R3, I think, was their last release to that regard, which was, 2 years now, maybe in a year and a half.
I mean, 2 years is like
yeah.
an
And
age in photography terms.
And it's been slowing down a lot. I think it's just kind of the hangover from the chip shortage, COVID. There's a lot of things going on, I think, on the supply chain there. So, and we're probably seeing the effects of some of the hangovers there. Like Canon they were going to have, I think, the R1 out in 2023. It sounds like maybe we'll get an announcement. That's the Z9 competitor, I guess, on the Canon side, the old 1DX3 into mirrorless. I don't know, maybe 2024 at some point, maybe even the end of 24. I don't know what the latest rumors are, but things are taking longer than what they used to just a couple of years ago before the pandemic.
But I have to say, going back to weight quickly, when we met at the airport, and you handed me the R3, it's like it's so much lighter than the Z9.
Yeah. It looks a lot
really
heavier than what it is. Yeah, it looks like a 1DX when you're picking it up, and it's like, oh wow, it's really nothing.
No, it was. I reckon it's got to be 2/3 of the weight.
Yeah,
I don't know what the stats are. Somebody will tell us in the comments.
It feels light, and it's got the ergonomics. That's one really good advantage. One thing I'll mention just really quickly, Rob. When you were talking about depth of field, when we were talking about Micro Four Thirds, I'm kind of the I think I'm the opposite when it comes to depth of field and using certain lenses. So if I'm really close to an animal and I'm taking a portrait, like when we were in Shetland when was that, in July? 2 months ago already. Time flies. But when we were in Shetland, you can get so close to these puffins where, I'm stopping down, right? So I'm at f8, if I'm really close and I want to get the eye and the bill and they're not parallel, maybe I'm f11, I'm stopping down. So I don't mind having more depth of field in those situations. It's the situations where I'm putting the animal in the environment that I prefer a much shallower depth of field. So in the back here, I shoot great blue heron, snowy egrets and stuff, but I try to do it with an environmental perspective. So they'll be smaller in the frame, and then I'll have like loblolly pines and trees from the cove. I have a Canon. It's an old I bought it used. It's an EF 200 f2. So I'll shoot those at f2. And that's when I love that, because I'll get the bird in focus. And instead of doing anything in post, you can see the environment, but it's soft. It's almost like you took the clarity scale and went down a couple of points. So
it's subtle. So you get the concentration on the bird, and then you still get that feel of environment without it overwhelming the whole image. Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah, the sharpness is only on the bird, and everything else is rendered fairly, Orton effect, if you will, but in camera. So I like the shallow depths of field in the wider perspectives versus the tighter perspectives, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does make perfect sense. But no, I think the Micro Four Thirds in those circumstances would be really cool, actually. But how do you find the ISO performance of the R3 versus sort of the older camera bodies that you've owned from Canon over the years?
I think it's great, actually. I think it's the best noise performer of all the Canon bodies that I've had, and this probably includes the 1DX Mark III, although I had it for a short period of time. It's interesting. I mean, over the years, as the camera bodies would come out from Canon, especially in the DSLR days, things would include, they'd improve maybe a third of a stop, but some of these improvements, you're like improving us by a stop, in my opinion, in terms of the ISO performance. So the old rule was, if I was shooting, I wouldn't go over ISO 6400. I go beyond that all the time now. I don't even think twice. And in addition to the great noise performance on these cameras, there's some awesome software products that are now competing even with Topaz. Topaz was the standard that everybody used for years, Topaz denoise and sharpen, but that DxO RAW, oh my God. I mean, you can run some images out of that are really, really high on the ISO side, and they look amazing. So I don't let anything stop me at this point.
I mean,
So
even Lightroom now, the
yeah,
denoise tool in Lightroom is really
right.
good.
They have that. Yeah. And I've tried
Yeah.
it. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it is pretty good. It is pretty good. And I think, a lot of people listening to this will probably have Lightroom. And if you've got it on the subscription, which they will try and point you towards, obviously, you'll get the update. And that's I would say it's almost as good as Topaz.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not quite, but it's not far off. So no, I mean, I shot something on this walk I was telling you about, and I couldn't be bothered to get the tripod out. It was just I'm probably not going to use the image for anything. It was just almost a record shot of the walk, I guess, but it was in really contrasting conditions, really shady, and to get the shutter speed that I really needed to take a picture handheld, I bumped the ISO up to 10,000, thinking, oh, it probably won't be usable, but I got it back on the computer and I wouldn't have known. I mean, it was like 1,000 ISO shot from the D800. To be honest with you, I just thought it was so good, and I thought this is why are we even worried about this anymore? It's
you're right.
And actually having that sort of 45 megapixel sensor as well, just resize it, just downsize it, and you lose a lot of it anyway.
And it used to be where, if you had a ton of megapixels packed into a sensor, you couldn't go too high on the ISO. It was just a couple of years ago where, what was that camera I was shooting? It was a higher, 5DSR.
Yes, 5D. Yeah.
And, or no, is it the 5DSR? I think it was. I remember it was a 50 megapixel. I'm pretty sure that was the name. If I screw up, somebody message it in the comments of the podcast, but it was like 50 megapixel. This came out in 2017 timeframe, maybe even 2016. And it was great, but you could not, if you push the ISO on that, it would look horrible. Now, you look at the R5. The R5 can perform so much better than that, which was a couple of years later.
What's the pixel count with the R5?
It's at 4. I think it's 45 megapixels.
45, yeah. So it's the equivalent of the Z9, basically. Yeah.
And to me, the sweet spot is right around there. The old 5D Mark IV that I had, I've had a lot of Canon cameras, as you could tell. I'm kind of constantly buying and trading in, but I'm like, it's like a swap meet over here, Rob. That was what, 30 megapixel. That's even a sweet spot. The R3 that I'm shooting with mostly now is 24, which is okay. I just need to make sure that I'm not cropping in too much. I don't like to crop a lot anyhow. If I'm shooting a macro shot and I want to highlight some sort of detail, I tend to crop in more in those situations. But if anything, now these days, if I'm processing an image, I'm just cropping to level the image or to work the edges to get some distractions out. But I'm not. A lot of people, in my opinion, go a bit overboard with cropping. They're cropping over 50%, 60%, and they're throwing it on Instagram thinking,
because you can't see.
Yeah. So there's an advantage there. But if I can't hold something up on the big screen on my iMac or a larger screen, I just won't post it.
But then again, if you're shooting 45 megapixels, cropping 50% is nothing anyway. If you think
R3, it's different.
Yeah. But if you're you go back to the days of the original 5D at 12 megapixels. That I still sell pictures that I took, with those cameras. They still sell on libraries. There's nothing wrong with them. You can print them at A3. You wouldn't know the difference.
An old friend of mine shot for the New York Times for years in New York, and he always mentioned to me, he said, all I need is 11 megapixel. He goes, I shoot with 11 megapixel. That's fine for anything. That was his.
Honestly, up to double page spread in a magazine, you wouldn't. It's absolutely fine for those sorts of things. And to be honest, even if you're going billboard type stuff, you view it from so far away. You don't need the pixel count anyway, because it's kind of if you're printing it large, you're viewing it from further away.
That's a problem too. Like and I've done this in the past where I'll make larger prints for folks who are buying some of my photos, or I'll even make them for myself. But I see a lot of people fall into that trap where the magnifying glass comes out and they're walking to 1 inch from the print. Oh, I'm like, you're not supposed to look at it that way. When a print is this big, you're supposed to be way back, and I guess it's, human nature to pixel peep if you like photography, but
I had a client do that to me once. I did some portrait work, years ago, and I did take some prints, which I had printed myself. and the magnifying glass came out. Honestly, anyway, so you will
You're
get
waiting
people
for a
that will do it.
Sherlock Holmes, and yeah, I know.
Yeah, it
You
was.
know.
It was exactly like that. It was quite amusing, really. But yeah,
And even if even at the right standard, if it does come up soft, and there's other software tools. What is that? Gigapixel, and there's a few that where you could literally,
Topaz
yeah, you
do
can
it, do
enlarge
a
it and
sharpening thing. Yeah,
add in detail. And I've tried that a couple of times with some really large prints. It doesn't work that bad. It's actually
yeah.
not.
No, it's okay. So the other thing I always thought is, here we go again comparing Nikon versus Canon, but I always thought were better. Certainly, maybe 10 years ago, and I don't know how this sort of now plays out. With the sort of current camera bodies that we're using. I know a lot of people don't shoot JPEG, and they just stick to RAW. You got to shoot RAW. But I still do at times shoot JPEGs, and I've shot a lot of JPEGs in the past. And I know that from some of the Canon shooters that I would talk to, they wouldn't shoot JPEG simply because what came out of the camera was
Hmm.
awful.
Interesting.
Whereas I thought that the JPEG quality from Nikon, and I still do, is really, really good. So I don't know whether you have experience of that, whether JPEG something you shoot on occasion, but what
Yeah.
the quality of the JPEGs like from the Canon.
I've never shot. Well, maybe I've done it once or twice, and it's probably by accident, where I switched.
you've
It was not by
twiddled a
intention.
dial.
Yeah, I'm surprised at that, only in the sense that I always thought one of the things, and again, this is just my eye too. I always thought the color science that Canon had was better than Nikon. I don't like, and this is just me from preference, Nikon, the way the blues in Nikon, they're a little too cyany for me. At least, again, I'm only going by Nikon shooters that I know, but these are multiple shooters, and I see images. I don't like the color science on the blues. So that's a little surprising to me. It could be true though. I've never really shot in JPEG, unless it was an accident, and I was not, I was cursing and looking at it and saying, "Oh no, those photos were
Yeah.
never." But yeah. So no, it could be true. It surprises me a little bit, but again, it's all personal taste.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I do know for a fact that the science is different in those cameras, although people say,
Yeah.
well, they share technology and blah blah, but no, they are different. Because I know that the raw files and I know it all comes down to white balance and this, that, and the other, but I have shot things with the same white balance settings in a studio environment with the Canon, and then I've done it again with it when I changed to Nikon, and it is different. It is
Is
different.
one warmer and one's cooler? Is
Yeah,
that the general?
yeah.
And let me
And the
guess,
Nikon was cooler, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what
yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, it was definitely, because I did some, again, so when I used to do some commercial work, I shot some, they were masks, they were masquerade masks or whatever. So they wanted a uniform background. So I had this background cloth that I'd use all the time, and I switched cameras, and I'd use the same lighting setup, the same, settings on the camera, and they were different, when the raw files came out. And as I said, Nikon was definitely cooler. So it's funny how, what you think should be the same actually isn't, because of, I don't know, the processor, the sensor, whatever it is. The files did not come out the same. So you had to sort that out in post. But
it's funny. I mean, when it comes to Nikon, I think it's a double-edged sword with Nikon when it comes to cameras. I think, and history will look back at the DSLR generation, and it went a long time, but I think the greatest DSLR that was ever released was probably the DA50, and many people would agree.
I'd agree with that.
At the same time, and just not long after that, that D6 was a total flop. One common criticism of Nikon, and this is the reason why I think they lost a lot of shooters, they were slow to pick up on the mirrorless revolution. Of course, Sony started with it, and they had that technology for years. When the the A9 came out, and this was like 2017, Canon was behind, Nikon was behind. They were still releasing, 1DX, D5, but the D6 was kind of a flop. No one bought it. I don't even know if they marketed it. They were so behind the eight ball on that. So that kind of followed up, in my opinion, the D850, which was incredible. Canon quickly caught up with the R5 and the R6, the R5 was a revolutionary camera. I thought, I still shoot with it. I love it. But it took Nikon a while to get to, where they are right now with the Z9. They were behind Canon and Sony, at least insofar as the releases were concerned. And a lot of I think Nikon shooters got impatient, and some of them jumped ship. And a lot of, to the point where people were saying, "Oh, is Nikon going to make it?" And so I think their best moments happen just before some of their lowest moments, in my opinion, when it comes to
yeah.
Of course,
No,
that's
I'd agree. Sort of as a Nikon shooter, obviously, I was waiting because, let's face it, the Z6, the Z7, and the subsequent iterations of those cameras, the reviews from a wildlife perspective were not good. And most of them sort of focused, focused, pun intended, around the autofocus system, which, basically was, not that, well, it wasn't rated compared to other brands. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And quite rightly so from what I have read. I've never owned those cameras. I've never shot those cameras. I don't know. From what I've heard, probably the reputation is deserved. So I was waiting. I wasn't going to jump in and go down the route of of those bodies, because they kind of didn't do what I'd want them to do, and they weren't enough for me to change from the 850. Which I mean, we all know we've talked about the advantages of mirrorless, particularly in wildlife photography, and the big one for me is silent shooting and being able to see the exposure through the viewfinder. I think those are the two biggest things for me in terms of digital versus traditional mirrorless, should I say, versus the standard DSLR with the mirror. Where was I going with this? I've lost my train of thought. I have to cut this bit out. Where was I going with it? I've had total brain fog.
Oh, it was you were talking about
I was talking about so basically I decided I wasn't going to go down the route of getting the Z6 or the Z7, and I would wait. And I would just see what happened, because the thing is, when changing systems, it's not the cameras that are the issue. It's all the investment you've put into the glass that is the problem. So I thought, okay, so I could sell the stuff that I've got, but you don't get what it's really worth secondhand, generally speaking, and then you're going to be buying new or whatever. There's always a premium, so it's always going to cost you a lot to change, and I didn't want to do that. Plus, I was quite comfortable with Nikon, and I kind of thought that they would eventually catch up. And the rumors were around for a while about the Z9, and then it came out, and I waited, and I thought and then everybody started raving about it.
Yeah,
and the reviews were good, and people that I know bought those. I know and I trust their judgment. Bought the camera body. They used it for 3-6 months, and they would tell me about it, and they'd tell me how fantastic it was. And then I made up my mind and just thought, right, okay, now everybody else has field tested it for me. I'll go and buy one. And I think they've come out with some amazing DSLRs. I think the D800, when that came out, and that was 35, whatever it is, megapixels. I forget the exact count. I mean, that was just like, what the hell is going on? Why would you ever need that many? I can remember that discussion, and that was a game changer of a camera. Then the D850, as you say, I don't think there are many people that would argue that probably is the best DSLR ever made.
Yeah.
And I think the Z9 has it's certainly put them back on the map. And those people that stuck with Nikon, I think, have been rewarded at the end of the day, because I haven't used it extensively yet. I've only had it for like 3 or 4 months, but from my experiences in Shetland in particular, I mean, I was hanging over the side of the boat. It was getting soaked with
Oh,
seawater, absolutely soaked.
and
You
I
know
was
what
there
those
like 1
gannets are
week
like.
after you getting
Yeah,
soaked in that same on that same boat. I
yeah.
know. Yeah, you're right.
So
It's
how wet their camera, and I'm thinking salt water. This has cost me so, and I just wiped it off, and it was fine. And
yeah,
I thought
yeah.
you could just feel, the build quality of it. And as I said, the things I was able to do with that camera that I couldn't do with the 850,
Yeah, I
it
mean,
blew my mind.
I doubt the D800 probably didn't have a flip screen, did it?
No,
Yeah.
no,
So I mean, that in and of itself, if you're hanging over a boat, is and then add the AI in where you don't have to manually move the focus points. You can literally get birds in flight holding the camera away from you, looking down on it. I mean, it's a
yeah.
possibility.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
actually, the flip screen is a really good point and
Yeah.
something I was going to come on to talk about, because if I have a major gripe about Nikon, is the screen. I mean, why does that not flip out, turn around, and
Oh, it doesn't? I thought it
no,
did.
it just comes out, and you can only only sort of moves in that one plane, so it'll come out and you can flip it up, you can flip it down, but you can't pull it out, turn it
Hmm,
around.
interesting.
It's that I think is a really big mistake
That was a
that they need to
complaint for
fix.
years in the Canon world too, in the 1DX line and the DSLR days. And maybe excuse, well, I'll say it, the excuse that everybody was told was that when you introduce the flippy screen, it it breaks a lot easier. So when you're in the cold, wear and tear, or whether you're shooting NFL games, you're a sports shooter, or you're up in the Arctic or whatever, the flippy screen, it introduces more things that can go wrong, and it makes it less rugged. That's what people were told. But that being said, on all the pro bodies now, they're being introduced. So I don't know if that was BS, or maybe it wasn't. But I know one thing: it's huge if you want to be able to get low and not have to worry about getting low yourself. I mean, especially when you're on a boat, it's a game changer. It really
Yeah,
is.
I mean, it'll come out, and so you can get low in a boat, and it'll, you can pull the screen out, you can look down on it. If you are had it above your head, you could do it the other way around. You could pull it down so you can look up into it, but you can't switch it around so you look at it from the lens and you can see the screen. You can't flip it into portrait, so that is, I think, I get why, but I think that's a mistake, and I think that's something they need to look at.
Yeah.
It's probably my biggest gripe
Hmm.
with the
I mean,
Z9, actually.
that's an interesting point. I mean, I would say my biggest gripe with the R3, which I'll call the Canon competitor because they don't have an R1, but it's the slots. So as far as the memory cards go, so there's a CF Express Type B slot, and then there's an SD card slot, which is like, no. I mean, it's basically their flagship camera. So in my opinion, I'm sure the R1 will, but the R3, in my opinion, should have two CF Express Type B slots, because I like to record on both cards in case a card fails, and I have that sense of security. Now, if I put in the CF Express Type B and then I put an SD card and I want to record on both cards, it slows down the camera, because
Yeah.
in order to record both, I'm recording at the speed of the SD versus the CF Express Type B. So I think that's really, really crappy, and it's that Canon crippled their R3 a little bit with that. That said, I will say, uh, Sony has the CF Express Type A cards, and I think they can go nowhere near in terms of storage with the CF Express Type B. So I've got, a 1 terabyte. I've got 512s. I have friends who have 2 terabyte cards. So you go in the field and you're shooting. I mean, you're laying the hammer down. You don't have to worry about it. You can just keep shooting and shooting, and then you download when you get back from the shoot. When you're shooting with, I'm trying to think what the CF Express Type A, I think it's maybe 165 gigabyte, maybe. I think it's nothing. I mean, especially if you're shooting 45 megapixels or 50 megapixels on the A1,
Yeah.
you're there in
I
no
mean,
time.
exactly. I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, the
Yeah,
Z9 has two,
yeah,
um,
that's actually really good.
which is really good. And I think because they made that mistake with the Z6 and 7, didn't they? They didn't have those. They had one. I think one of them only had one port. It didn't even have two.
Oh wow.
I could be wrong. I could be
That
wrong.
yeah, some of the consumer grade, the like the R10, and I know the Rebel, they would just have one. There would be one card in there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that's really good. But as you say, if you're shooting 20 frames a second in RAW, which is what the Z9 will do, and it's 45 megapixels, you are going to fill up your cards very, very quickly if you are doing something. You're shooting birds or other wildlife, or you're doing sports or whatever it is, where there's lots of action going on. And someone like Shetland, I mean, as you said, hammer down, those cards were full at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And actually they take a hell of a long time to download.
Oh, I know. You're standing on the cliff, and these puffins are coming in, with eels in their mouth, and you're just like, because you want to get that perfect shot, or at least the wing posturing and everything else. So you're just going to keep shooting, because that's not something you can just strategically plan for and just hit the shutter button. You got to lay the hammer down, and then one of those shots are going to be good. And trading out a card every couple of minutes you can't do that in the field. So I think it's a major disadvantage from a Sony standpoint.
But isn't it amazing where we've gone, in 10 years, even in the card technology, and how much storage we can get on such a small thing, and how quickly it can write that data.
I mean, the cards now are the cost of what the cameras used to be.
Well, actually, this was one of the things that held me back a little bit from changing early, because it wasn't just the cost of the camera body itself, it was then the cards that would go with it. So all the accessories, they really mount up. So I had to have the adapter, obviously, because that's another thing I want to come to talk about, actually, is the lens mount. So you have to have the adapter for the old, F mount glass. So that's another £250 or whatever it is. Then the cards, I mean, you can pay £600, can't you, or $700 for one card. You see, and then you buy two or three or four, or and then all those. So you're paying almost as much as the camera for cards if you want a pocket full of them.
A friend of mine has these terabyte, multiple terabyte cards, and they're also bringing hard drives with them. I'm like, what? Why do you even need to bring a hard drive? The memory card in and of itself is the size of your hard drive. When you think about it,
it's another backup, isn't it? I guess. I mean, actually, when you think about it, some of these trips just can't. Well, cost thousands and thousands, and you invest all that money. You do not want a memory card to fail on you.
It's a sense of anxiety, because even when when Kerm and I were in Shetland, we would shoot all day, and we're taking thousands and thousands of images, and we get home, or back to where we're staying with Rebecca's B&B. So we'd get back there, and Kerm would say, "Well, are you backing up?" I'm like, "Nah, I'm too tired. I'll back up tomorrow." And then he's backing up, and I'm like, shit, I better back. There's that sense of anxiety that you're going to lose an image, because I was only recording the one card, as I was saying before. I didn't have the dual slot that I could. So anyhow, it's always a sense of agita for me when I'm on a trip, because I want to make sure that I have everything backed up and I don't lose anything.
Yeah, no, I was doing that. We were getting back to the accommodation at night, and Jennifer would pour the wine, and I'd turn the laptop on, and wait for however long it took to back up however many thousand images I'd taken that day. And some days were busier than others. Obviously, we went out on the boat, and of course that was just, as you say, it's just hammer down. You just came back with some amazing stuff. I still haven't gone through it all.
I have not. I've got my it's right here. I got to start. I've got all of my images on. I got a 5 terabyte hard drive, and I've just got to go through it. But hopefully this fall,
when the nights start drawing in and you have a little bit more time.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah. So
yeah. Oh dear. So what's your biggest gripe with Canon?
Well, I have to say, I think it's probably resolution. The megapixels, they're always on the lower side. And I can't say that, I wish I had this much resolution, or this needs more resolution, but just, it's always nice to have, like, again, the R3 is the flagship. That's 24 megapixel. Nikon's flagship is it 50, Rob? 45, the Z9?
45, yeah.
45. The A1 is 50. So, Now the R5 is 45 megapixel, and I can shoot 20 frames a second. But the disadvantage there is you're shooting 20 frames a second at instead of 14-bit, it's 12-bit RAW, so it's the compressed. You're not shooting. You're not able to shoot that 14-bit RAW at 20 frames a second. You can, in order to get the 14-bit, you have to shoot with the mechanical shutter, which is like 12 frames a second. So, although I have to say the R3, it's 30 frames a second, 14-bit RAW, and I think the Z9 is 20, right? So,
Yeah.
So the R3 is faster, but I wish I wish it had more resolution. There's always something Canon looks to. I'll say use that word intentionally because people call it the cripple hammer, but they'll cripple, their cameras to a certain extent. So, you're going to buy another version, or the R1 obviously will have certain things, but I'd have to say it's probably resolution. They make their own sensors, Nikon. I think that those are still, they have been, I don't know if it's changed. They are Sony sensors, but Canon makes their own sensors. And I don't think they're at par with Sony when it comes to that technology. The resolution's a little too low for me. It always has been.
Yeah. And have you got that? Because obviously on the Z9, they've got this sort of what OM call pro capture, this sort of pre-capture type thing, where basically if you activate the mode, you can have to press the shutter, and it's already buffering images, but it only records them when you hit the shutter button. So it records like however many frames you want to set the camera to record before when you hit the shutter button. So in other words, if you want to take a bird taking off in flight, and normally you'd miss it because it's a fraction of a second and your reaction isn't quick enough, if you're half to press the shutter button and then you press it when the bird takes off and you think you've missed it, you haven't, because it then records, it writes those images, it's sort of buffering to the card, so you don't miss that action. But they don't allow you to do that in RAW. It's only JPEG. So you have to enable this sort of JPEG, and that's a bit, to me, that's frustrating.
That's the Z9 does that, right? So yeah, I see. Yeah. Olympus was way ahead of the game on that.
Yeah, they were.
A lot of the Micro Four, well, maybe Panasonic too. I think they had it. I don't know. I think when it comes to that pro capture and image stabilization, the Micro Four Thirds cameras were way ahead of their time. And I think it took a little while for Canon, Nikon, Sony, some of the other the bigger brands, whatever you want to say, to catch up with that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that I had a pro loan from Olympus, as they were then. This was 5 years ago, because I remember, Claire came to the house and we'd only just moved in, so that must have been 5 years ago. And she went through all, Claire Harvey May from OM System, who hopefully we're going to get on the podcast at some point. With a little interesting discussion we've got sort of lined up, hopefully with her at some point. Anyway, and she was going through all these things, and that must have been 5 years ago. It was a pro capture, it was the image stabilization, all this fantastic technology, which is only just sort of bleeding through into the other brands over the last sort of 2 or 3 years. So yeah, they were way ahead of the game.
Yeah, definitely.
It's exactly why I looked at their system. Canon changed their lens mount, didn't they, with the mirrorless, like Nikon have also done.
Yeah.
And I have to say that one of my major problems with Nikon from when I started shooting with them was I felt the quality of their lens mount wasn't nearly as good as Canon, having shot both systems. So I'm actually glad they've changed, because I've never changed my mind. I just thought it's something that I think is very historic, and it didn't keep up with the technology because they didn't want to. I think people have invested so much in glass, because we all know that's where the major expense is. And I think when they sort of went from the traditional film SLRs to DSLR, they didn't want to introduce that as well. But that old mount system was I didn't think was very robust. And I had a couple of issues with it, breaking pins and, contacts going and that sort of thing. From what I've seen, the new Z mount is much, much better. But obviously that involves investing in new glass, which I haven't got to yet, but will do at some point.
Yeah, I'm a hybrid shooter when it comes to, I guess, the lenses, because there's still some older EF, which was the old Canon line, the DSLR line, lenses that I've shot for years that I love. Like I was mentioning before, that 200 f2, it's an amazing portrait lens, and it's great for, I think, wildlife. So I've kept that. My 600 is an old EF 600. I can't bring myself to upgrade because the new one is just kind of the same lens with. It's it's just the connect. You don't need the adapter, so it's a little shorter, I guess. But I can't see myself upgrading. So I'm a mix of what is the RF mount, which is the new mirrorless lineup, and then the EF lineup. So it's kind of fine. What I've done, because it was a pain for me in the field to take the adapter off of one lens and put it on another. So I kind of sucked it up and I bought a couple adapters. So because I only shoot mirrorless now, the R5 and the R3, every EF lens that I have, I bought the adapters for. So I keep the adapter on the lens. So it's just, plug and play versus taking the adapter off. And it's a lot of work in the field. Like, I mean, if you're in a shoot and you really need to switch and something's going on, it cost me images early on because I had to take not only the lens off, I had to take the adapter off, switch it on another lens, and put it on. It delays.
Yeah, if you're shooting a mixture of the lens mounts, presumably. Yeah. And what about the sort of selection of lenses that have the new mount lenses that are coming from Canon? What's that look like now?
I think they're great. I mean, I've got the RF 100 macro, which I use a lot. I shoot a lot more macro since Wild Art because some of the most incredible stuff is macro, and it really, and in judging, you see a lot of great macro work. So the macro is incredible. It's awesome. What else do I have? I've got some landscape lenses. I've got the 24 to 105, which is pretty standard, works fine. I've got the what do I have? A 14 to 35. That's pretty good too, for some wide angle work. Landscapes, animals up close, horses and stuff. I've used it for. I'm trying to think what else I have. Oh, the 70 to 200 is dynamite. It's excellent.
Yeah,
it's really, really good. It's lightweight and it's small. It's compact. And I also have the 100 to 500, which it's 7.1 at 500 was it's okay, but it's great. And it's a good the old EF system was 100 to 400. This adds another 100 millimeters in focal length, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, but of course,
it would have been better if it was 6.3. Yeah.
Yeah, Nikon have just released this 180 to 600, 6.3.
That's nice. Talk about versatility. I mean,
yeah, and it's a reasonable price as well. It's not going to break the bank, and you just think that's where I think some of these manufacturers have got it right when they start introducing lenses like this. Yeah, I know you can go online and there are people that will tell you you've got to have an f4 500 mil 600 mil, you can't shoot in low light, blah blah. Anyway, I don't agree.
I've always found that if I take one lens with me and I say I'm just only going to shoot with this lens, and you're creative, you will come up with good images. It doesn't matter. You'll work with the limitations of the lens, and you'll take advantage of what the advantages are of the lens. So I think that's always kind of BS, when people say, well, and it's bad for a lot of people too, because I've been in this situation. If I go out and I have all my lens or a lot of my lenses, and I almost always instinctually grab that 600. I'm like, why am I grabbing this 600? It's just because it's the biggest lens, right? I mean, your mind goes to it, and that's what you want to pick up. And I'm like, no, I'm leaving this home, and I'm only taking the 70 to 200, and I'm going to see what I come up with. And more than half the time, I like the lenses. I like the images from the 70 to 200 better.
Yeah. I mean, quite often I will go out and I'll just take the one lens, and normally it's the 200 to 500, I have to be honest. But I mean, that in itself gives you quite a good range, but I have to remind myself that, I don't have to shoot at 500 all the time, because that, when you got a zoom lens, I do tend to find that I shoot at the higher end of it most of the time, and I have to remind myself that, I don't have to do that. But no, that's probably my go-to lens. But I think the first lens I'm going to buy probably is the 180 to 600.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I've heard great things about that lens too. And again, the versatility, and it's always nice too if you're close to an animal. I mean, you can change the composition up instantly. You can get a close headshot, or you can zoom out, and with that range, you can do a you can do a bird in the environment, animal in the environment, and do a headshot. So
yeah, and apparently it'll even work with a converter. I'm not too sure about the light and the autofocus.
Converters. Speaking of converters, the one thing, again, I've never been a Nikon shooter, but what I've always heard, and I've seen in the field, I've seen converters thrown in the field against rocks with expletives. Nikon, at least in the old DSLR days, what was it? They had a 1.7, I think it was.
And was 1.4, 1.7, and a 2 times.
Okay, yeah. So the 1.7 and the 2 times, I'm going to say, just based on feedback, we're never the best performers in the field.
Correct.
A lot of, expletives and things were thrown, and I've seen it, and I've looked at the results. And Canon, I thought, had the edge then when Canon had a 1.4 and a 2 times, which worked great. I still use them, actually. What was it? The Mark 3s, I guess they were. And these are probably 7, 8, 9 years old at this point, and they were excellent. But Nikon, not so much for the teleconverters. That could have changed in the new mount.
The 1.4s are all right. The 1.4s work
that's
quite
what
well.
I've got a 1.7 and the 2 times. I heard were like, artistic blur. You can put them on.
However, I do hear good reports about the latest Z mount adapters. Okay. So I think they've ironed out those optical issues that they had with those converters, probably because I was told that don't waste your money on a 2 times because it is just appalling. I wouldn't have bought the 1.7 either. The 1.4 was okay. I can't use it with some lenses. It doesn't work with the 2 to 5. Just forget it.
Yeah.
And I don't use it a lot anyway. I tend to use it actually just with the macro. So with a prime macro lens, it's great if you just want that bit of extra reach with the macro. It works fine. But apart from that, it used to work great with the 70 to 200 as well.
Okay.
The 70 to 200 2.8, which is like the Canon, because I had the Canon EF 70 to 200 2.8. And I like you, I thought that was a fantastic lens, and I think Nikon is as good because I've shot with those 2 lenses, so I think that's as good.
That's good to know. And in those situations where I was just describing for the 1.7 and the 2 times teleconverter, and they weren't in situations where they were trying to get reach to the subject. There's heat haze, the subject's a million miles away. These were situations where they were fairly close, right? And they wanted to get maybe more detail or go in, so it wasn't one of those cases where, there's a bear across the field, it's 80 degrees and there's heat haze rising from it, right? And it looks like, Shiza, but it wasn't that. It was, the situations where the lens was expected to perform, it wasn't a user error thing. And I've never heard good things about those teleconverters.
Yeah. So what's the one thing you would change about what you shoot now?
That's a good question. Well, I'll tell you, and again, it goes back to, I guess, my complaint. 2 things really, and I would up the resolution. At least on the R3, I would up the resolution, and I'd have 2 CF Express Type B slots, so I can record to 2 cameras. Yeah. The R3, I wish I could shoot 20 frames a second and not shoot at compressed RAW and do the 14. I guess it would be the 14-bit, the full RAW, if you will. Those are the 2 things. I'm working around the edges on it, though. At the end of the day, they're not huge things, incremental changes. But I'm hoping that stuff will be solved with the R1. But again, how much is the R1 going to be? And if I get the R1, I would imagine if the R1 comes out and it's like 50 plus megapixel and it's faster than the R3, then the R5 and the R3 are completely redundant, right? Or they're both not as good. Neither of them stand up. So I would just sell both of those cameras and then get the R1. But we'll see what happens. TBD on that.
Yeah, I think for me it would be the flippy screen, which is, I think they've made an error there. and it should be more versatile. And probably the lack of RAW with the pre-capture.
Hmm. Yeah, I didn't
The
know
lack
about
of
that.
RAW option. Yeah, which is kind of annoying, and has made me not want to experiment with it so much. But I should do, really, because the JPEGs are so. I went on about how good the JPEGs were, so I should do, really. But it's kind of annoying, that, I think. And it's amazing how we haven't talked about video capabilities at all with these cameras, because I mean, if you're like me, I don't tend to shoot a lot of video.
Yeah, me either. I do slow-mo stuff, but I have to say, again, just objectively from a video standpoint, the critiques have always been on the side of Canon versus Nikon, especially with autofocus.
Yeah,
With the dual pixel, and Canon has always gotten better reviews for video than Nikon. Sony and Canon both, I would think. But again, I don't use it enough. I can't say from my own personal experience, but objectively, when you watch the YouTube videos and you hear all the pros out there, it seems Canon is, and that was
yeah.
revolutionized in the 5D series, right? In the DSLR days, the
Yes, it
video
was.
functionality that started was a big deal, and that kind of continues on. So
Yeah, because it's
cool.
so much more important to a lot of people now.
Yeah.
I mean, not really to the likes of you and me, who just our passion is stills. But
Yeah.
I guess I'm going to explore that side of it a little bit more, because I do think that, with YouTube and wanting to perhaps sort of push the channel a bit more, there's footage that I'm going to want to capture and edit into some of the videos that I'm thinking about producing over the next few months. So yeah, I'll be interesting to explore that. But I think that, from what I've heard, and I said I don't speak from experience because I've not shot video with the Z9 yet, but a lot of those autofocus issues, if it's anything like the stills, I think they've probably ironed out most of the problems that they had. Because certainly I didn't have an issue with the autofocus when I went to Shetland, and that's kind of using it almost straight out of the box, because I didn't shoot a lot before I went to Shetland, with the Z9. But yeah, no, I think so. From my point of view, I guess my major problems, flippy screen.
The flippy screen,
the flippy screen, and this sort of pre-capture not doing RAW. I think those are probably my biggest gripes. So what's the thing you like the most?
Couple of things, I guess. The speed, no doubt. I would say, it's specific with the R3, it's a speed, because it's 30 frames a second. And if you have an action sequence, I had a young osprey out here a couple weeks ago, first year bird, and it is learning how to dive. So it's on its own. It annoys the parents every so often, but so it was on an old tree back here. I think it was an old it was a black locust tree. No, was it black locust tree? It was that, or it wasn't a loblolly, but anyhow, it was on this smaller tree, and it just kept diving in the water, and it would miss and come back up. It was the perfect opportunity. So, and it didn't care about me. First year birds don't seem to, they haven't learned that.
They haven't learned that humans aren't good.
Be scared of humans, because we're like the worst thing on the planet, but they haven't learned that yet, thankfully. And so I kayaked up, and I was just watching this bird go down, and shooting 30 frames a second is amazing. So speed, and I'm not just a behavior shooter, but I like to have it. Having that speed, I think, is invaluable. So I would say probably the speed of the camera, no doubt.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that one. That's one thing that's sort of revolutionized, I think, my photography over the last few months is the speed. And like you say, it's not all about the speed in a lot of situations, but it really does make a big difference if you are shooting a behavioral sequence where you've got so many more choices, where the wing position might be in a slightly different place, or there are just so many more choices, and you can almost get the perfect frame. So that is really cool. And I actually come back to where we started. I actually really like the ergonomics of it.
Yeah,
I just think it for me, it just fits my hand perfectly, and it feels right. There's something that you can't describe, I think, with cameras, and that is when something just fits.
You need to feel part of the camera. It's like an extension of your body. And I think if the buttons are there's enough spacing, meaning the camera's a little larger to provide enough spacing for the buttons, it's easy for your muscle memory to, accommodate that. And you can, you don't have to look, obviously, your fingers move and you can do whatever you want. When the buttons are really close and it's so compact and it doesn't, fit nicely in your hand, you can run into problems because you literally have to look at the camera and make sure, you're hitting stuff you shouldn't be hitting. Right. So yeah, I think it's important. You're right.
So what
Underrated thing too. Most people
yeah.
don't talk about ergonomics. No.
So what we should do, in the interests of being fair to all the manufacturers out there, is actually get some Sony and some other manufacturers, some OM shooters on, and talk to them about why they like their system. So
That'd be great.
we'll plan it. We'll plan in some of those, and we'll get some more guests on. As we as we sort of go on the podcast journey a little further. But we've got lots of other stuff that we've already been talking about, Josh, and trying to line up. So I did talk to Rebecca this week, so we'll get Rebecca Nason on very shortly, and we'll have a chat about Shetland. That might be next up. I said I've got hopefully OM system coming on, and we can have a chat about AI actually is what we thought we'd chat about with them. So look out for that one. And we'll get some an OM shooter on, we'll get a Sony shooter on, and some other brands, and we'll have some conversations as we go through the future months in other episodes. But if why don't you leave a comment in the comments section below and tell us what you shoot and why you like the system. Give us your opinion. That'd be great. And of course, if you've enjoyed listening to our waffle and our discussion on our cameras, and it resonates with you, then please do leave us a like and a rating, and put any comments you'd like to in the comments section on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That would be much appreciated, because the algorithms pick up on these things, and they then promote the podcast to other people, and of course that's what it's all about. And if you've enjoyed it, then I'm sure there may be other people that would enjoy it too. So and do tell your friends, share stuff on social media, share a link on social media. That would be much appreciated if if it's been entertaining and you've enjoyed our chat. So anyway, Josh, what's next for you over the coming weeks?
Not too much, really. I'm just gonna, shoot around the house, see what's cooking, see what's moving in. I think, in the next few weeks, some ducks will start to come in, and that's really the high time for where I live on the eastern shore of Maryland. It's known for waterfowl and ducks in the wintertime. And in the cove here behind my house, I'll have tons of stuff. Tundra swans will be in good numbers, and some other buffleheads, gadwall, Canada geese. So things are going to start to change over. So I'm going from terns, herons, to more waterfowl. So I'll be looking for those changes and do some shooting, and work on eventually planning my next trip. Looking to go forward to, I think I mentioned to the Falklands in February. So that's going to be
that'll be epic.
Yeah, that's going to be on the agenda, and I'd love to maybe get away for a week or so, sometime before the holiday season, to shoot in the wintertime. I'd love to do Yellowstone or maybe Grand Teton or something like that.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'm probably going to do some. Well, like you, the sort of water birds are now sort of coming back onto my radar. With all the sort of autumnal mists and things coming in, and I guess fungi as well. Now that sort of season is upon us, and the leaves will start turning. So some woodland stuff, and then I go away to Wales at the end of October, beginning of November. For special event, and anyway, away for a week there. So that'll be fun. I'll go and do some stuff on the coast maybe. And after that, I think. Well, we're going back. Oh, we're going away again over Christmas. So going to Yorkshire. So there might be some stuff with, dippers or something like that. It's not really dipper time of year, but might be able to do something like that in Yorkshire. And then I think back to Wales again in January on the coast, a place we stayed at over Christmas last year, actually. And it's literally right on the beach. and you wake up to the sound of curlew and turnstone and oyster catcher coming in through the bedroom window. So literally I can roll out of bed, put my waders on and just go and, photograph those things, on the beach, and, with a mug of coffee in hand.
Might be the same curlews we saw in Shetland, right? I mean, maybe they migrate.
Might be. Who knows? But no, it'd be so that I'm looking forward to all that. So lots of stuff coming up, and we obviously Wild Art is rolling on as well, and we're going through the process of of judging those sort of monthly contests. So before you know it, we'll be looking at sorting out the overall winner of that, which will be quite exciting, and working on plans for next year as well. So because we're going to change things around a little bit again, and something new as well for Wild Art for next year, sort of not really competition related, which I'm kind of working on too. So this is lots going on, and certainly keep myself busy. But anyway, Josh, great discussion as always.
Yeah, this was awesome. I love talking about this stuff without getting into the whole techie stuff, because you can, argue that till the cows come home. But it's fun.
Well, and there, if you want to talk techie stuff, there's plenty of stuff on YouTube and other podcasts that will do that. That's kind of not what we do. We just, this is just two friends having a chat about photography generally. So we don't plan it really. It's just organic, and we just let it take us wherever it takes us. So thanks for listening to our ramblings, which I hope you've enjoyed. Anyway, Josh, great to see you. Thanks again, and thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you all again in the next one.
Talk soon, everybody. Thanks.
You have been listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast. If you have enjoyed the content, then please help us to spread the word by sharing a link on your social media platforms, giving us a like, and leaving us a comment. See you all again next time.